Welcome into another edition of the Blue White Breakdown. That's Bob Flounders, and I'm Dustin Hockensmith. Our twin series, our Ginger Twin series. We were trying to remember, Bob, and I played this game with Johnny also a couple weeks ago. When was the last time that you and I got together on a podcast? And it has been quite a while that we've deprived people of this delicious treat.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know how Johnny feels about this, but I consider Johnny to be almost a borderline ginger. He's not quite there, but it's almost like there's three of us at least now, and you're in good company. But other than, I know I spent some time with you during the latter stages of the wrestling season. I know we did a couple of podcasts within the last calendar year, but you're right. It's been too long, Dustin. And honestly, I think you're jumping on here at a pretty good time. We were talking before we started the podcast that, usually middle of June, it's like, what do you want to talk about? No, I don't know. What can we talk about? Now it's like we can't get it all in one podcast, not in one 25-minute podcast. And it's a great thing for the fan base. And it's literally all positive news, I think, mostly positive news for Penn State football. And, recruiting is off the charts right now at Penn State. I can't ever remember a time in my time on the beat, which dates back a long time, early 2000s, where it was this crazy in June. James Franklin and his staff are doing a great job just looking at the present, but also the future. But I thought, Dustin, before we get into that, I think the fans are pretty excited about a certain quarterback, a future Lion, hopefully, that just really stood out during the Elite 11 camp against some really good competition.
And it's hard to do that. And I think it's particularly hard to do that when you have more of like a well-rounded game. You don't have anything that screams at people, whether that's like your running ability or like Drew Aller with his huge frame. Ethan Grunkemeyer does not have those things, but he really made a name for himself out there. And I think he was a guy who was maybe starting to make some cases for a fourth star. But he certainly looks like the next guy that Penn State has evaluated early, gotten on board early, and then seen his stock rise. I think he's on the cusp of doing that. He made the Elite 11 finals. He made the final Elite 11. And I don't know, I can't remember anybody else who did that. I'd have to look back and see. But the one thing
I think Hackenberg had to have been part of that. Elite 11, but you're right. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, and Grunkemeyer was not a big name coming in. He's going up against the 4 and 5 stars of the world, and I think he very much held his own. I watched a couple of those clips floating around on Twitter, just his deep ball accuracy, how easily he seems to push the ball down the field, which I think all roads seem to lead back to some kind of Sean Clifford disrespect. And I don't mean it in that way, but between Aller and a kid like Grunkemeyer, it's nice to see getting the ball downfield with ease, because that has not been an easy thing the last few years.
Yeah, for me, the tip-off was the immediate offer when he was up at Penn State as a 3-star. And then he was still a 3-star when he was invited to the Elite 11 camps. And I'm going like there's going to be a change real soon if he just performs the way that he did in front of Penn State at that camp, because you don't see very many 3-stars getting Elite 11 invites, and he must have just been lights out. And you are right. James Franklin and his staff, there might be a couple schools that identify promising players that are going to outperform their star rating at the present nationally, but there aren't very many. I mean, you can go through the list of some players that they identified early, and they were either able to keep them or they lost them because other schools were like, whoa, this kid's really good. So hopefully Penn State can hold on to this kid, but it was I think it's a really good story. And I also think I was looking at him throw, and I think he's going to add some really good weight. I think they list him right around 195, 190, 200. I think by the time he's done on the high school level, he'll probably be creeping in the low 200s or maybe 210, and he's going to be, because he's going to have to get a little bit bigger, right, to play for Penn State in the Big Ten. I think he will. He's certainly got the frame for it, but that was one of the more I can't think of the last time like a player really made that significant of a rise, a Penn State kid, whether it was at a Penn State camp or at Elite 11, but he showed he belonged. And that's a great sign because he was not intimidated. He wasn't rattled. He had the number one prospect, Raiola, who's going to Georgia. You know, he's throwing, and that guy's there. He wasn't scared, Dustin, and that's the sign you want to look for. Penn State's had another pretty well-known three-star quarterback that was never scared, in Trace McSorley. Ethan's a little bit different of a quarterback, but that's what you want to see from a kid who, you know, really has not opened any eyes nationally yet.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point in terms of how a kid competes in that setting. And he did compete at a high level. He did compete smooth. He looked comfortable, which is a good thing. A couple of things that kind of jump out to me is I think if you're following along with Penn State recruiting, you're looking cycle by cycle at, like, say, okay, when is Drew Aller's successor coming on board? When are they going to get another 5-star? You know, and if so, what's the right timing for that as far as him exhausting his eligibility and making sure that you're covered? I don't think a lot of people were all that excited about Grunkemeyer, but he looks like he's very much a candidate for that. And you know, and I think it's safe to say that, you know, between Aller and Grunkemeyer, two kids who are from Ohio, Yurcich seems to be able to lock in on who he likes, why he likes them. And he's generally been kind of right about that. And I think those two guys both soared through the summer months in the recruiting front. And I think Justin Fields was another one, obviously before Mike Yurcich arrived, but he was another one who was not all that highly touted before Penn State came in. I think, you know, Penn State's reputation precedes it on the recruiting front with these services who, if they offer and a kid commits, they almost always seem to get a bump. And another one, by the way, who was at the Elite 11 finals catching passes was Luke Reynolds, the tight end from New England, who now I think 24/7 Sports, he was a middle 3-star. He wasn't an upper 3-star when he committed. I think 24/7 Sports has him as a top 100 player in the country right now.
Yeah. And just real quick, if there are any, I'm just trying to cover our bases, Dustin. If there's any Beau Pribula family members or are fans of Beau, and I know that Penn State's got plenty of them on the staff, we won't discount him. He's made some pretty big strides since getting on Penn State's campus. He looks like a different player physically. I know they like him. But we're talking about recruiting, and we're talking about he's already in the fold, right? And he's got his work cut out for him as long as Drew, I think, is on campus to see playing time. But if anything, I mean, things change in a hurry. But we're really talking about maybe 2-3 years down the line. I mean, Drew's going to be here through at least the 2024 season, and things are going to change. At some point, Beau is going to force the issue, or he's going to want to play. Will Levis did that, so we're not discounting Beau. We're just saying, though, that Penn State yet again has found a quarterback they really like, and now the rest of the world, the college football world, is kind of catching up to figure out just why they liked him so early. And I'm sure he's going to get a lot of attention between now and the time he actually signs.
Yeah, and I think, definitely no discount there, especially when you look at, and the timing works out. Like, I think that's one of the benefits of having Aller play right away as a freshman is that now if you're Beau Pribula, you're hanging around and you're thinking, I can start for 2 years if all goes to plan. And then the other thing is, if you got 2 years on somebody like Pribula will have on Grunkemeyer, then it's really hard to make up that ground. Like, it's an open competition, just as Franklin says right now, it's an open competition. But, you know, you have to do something pretty spectacular if you're Ethan Grunkemeyer, or even if you're Jackson Smolik, who's on the roster right now, to unseat Pribula. Like, he's in a pretty good position there. Definitely no discount there. And I think he's another one who, you know, if he didn't love to compete, he wouldn't be at Penn State right now. Like, I think he would have seen the writing on the wall and decided not to. But I think they got a kid who they can develop and who recognizes that and will stick around for that shot.
Yeah, and I mean, it was you know, 5-star signees at Penn State that play quarterback don't grow on trees. This is I think James's first one. He inherited Hackenberg. So had it not been for that, I mean, Beau would be the starting quarterback this year, and I think they would have tailored the offense around some of the things he can do maybe a little bit better than Drew. And with that defense and with that offensive line and that running game, they would still be very formidable. I do believe that, and I do think that if anything would happen to Drew, I think that Penn State would feel pretty confident in what Beau can do, especially when it comes to doing things with his legs.
This is not a Taquan Roberson situation. In other words,
it does not feel like one. It does not feel like one.
Yeah, and I think there's probably some time, and I think you probably, if he's your number 2, you probably have some stuff in mind. You have some stuff in a playbook ready for Beau Pribula if he is to step in there.
Yeah, and you know what? You're going to know right away, because you could say, well, they're going to save it for like the big games. No, you need to see if he can handle it early in the season. And there's going to be some games. I believe the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens come in week 2. West Virginia's in week 1, and their defense is not good. I mean, I would be on the lookout for some of that stuff early in the season, because if I'm James and I'm Mike, I want to see how, there's the speed of the game, all that stuff. I would not wait, if we felt good about Beau Pribula, to get him in there and see just what he can do to a defense.
And the benefits are twofold there, right? You can present a different look with Beau Pribula, so that helps you immediately. You can justify not a 2-quarterback system, but bringing him in for a series or 2, even when it's still a game.
Yeah.
In some situations, and you can get some different looks there for the defense, but also, the more real game experience and reps that he gets in a game, the more comfortable he is if his number is called at some point. So I would expect, again, not a 2-quarterback system, but some packages where you might see Beau, doing some unique things with his legs.
And that transfer portal is always going to be in the back of the minds of coaches and players. And I think that it's an unsaid thing, right? But that is also a factor in the second half of games where Penn State has fairly comfortable leads. And I think that that's something that maybe the 2016 James Franklin or the 2017 James Franklin, maybe there were some games where Trace McSorley was in there, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why? But I do think that will be a factor as well. And anyway, there are a lot of reasons why I think you will see Beau sooner rather than later.
And I think it's a good thing. I like his temperament and the way that he competes. Yeah. And he's got some McSorley moxie about him, or McGloin moxie, depending on how whatever kind of McMoxie you want. I think he's got it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing him play. And I think so is Penn State. I think so are the fans are a little curious about him too, because for all the reasons we've listed, and hopefully, things never go according to script, right? But I think between what they have on the roster now at the top 2 positions and somebody like Grunkemeyer, and who, James is not going to stop recruiting quarterbacks, but the quarterback room is always something that I think, that's something they're always looking to improve, on a day-by-day basis. If they get a chance, they're going to bring in as many talented kids at that position as they can, because I'll tell you what, the rest of the positions, a lot of those positions, they're looking pretty good for the next couple of years at just about every other position.
Yeah, and that 22 recruiting class and that freshman class last year, what an infusion of young energy and young talent. Excuse me. Young energy and young talent that can kind of take them the next few years. And just one last thing on the recruiting front at quarterback, I wanted to mention was, I think Penn State, they don't often get their plan A quarterback. They get a commitment and they lose a commitment. And I think when you get a commitment from Ethan Grunkemeyer, there's almost that like plan B exhaustion. But you look at, I don't know if you can say Drew Aller was a plan B necessarily, but Will Levis was, and Tommy Stevens was. These were not the primary guys they were going after. And I think they've shown that, they're clearly, their evaluation is good if they're getting their second option or whatever, and they're performing as they are, just as Ethan Grunkemeyer looks like he is too.
Yep. So kudos to Ethan for showing out on a big stage, and other than like a big national college football game, I know they weren't hitting him, but that there was a lot of pressure to perform, because if he doesn't do well, I mean, in the social media age, it can get nasty out there. And he from the very first, very first day, I think he really impressed some people. He probably might have, if he wasn't the last kid invited in the pecking order, he was one of the last ones in, and I really think that it should do wonders for his confidence, and I think it really has the fan base excited.
A lot of momentum can be generated that way, for the kid going into his final season, for him in the recruiting rankings, and I think just the energy from the fan base to get excited and rally behind this kid, because I don't think a lot of people were prior to this.
I agree. So Dustin, I'm looking at my computer to get this day right. It is June 21st. It's a Wednesday. And the reason I bring that up is June's almost out of here. And July, once July hits, that's Big Ten media days and, countdown to the first day of camp. So it does not feel like it's been 10 or 11 weeks since the blue-white game and the end of Penn State spring. But when it's nice out, it always flies by. And the reason I say that is with camp set for, I think, the first week of August, I know you've been doing some stuff on Penn State's freshman class. I think Johnny McGonigal's been doing some stuff. I have my eye on some guys, but really, as deep as this team is, there's still some positions up for grabs. There's still some players we haven't seen yet. But I do think, despite all the talent on this team, there are going to be, because it happened last year, there's going to be 4, 5, 6 players that kind of sneak up on you, and maybe even the coaching staff. And by the middle of September, they have some pretty key roles on the team. And I think whether it's injuries or rapid ascension or whatever, just the quality of the player or the transfer, it's going to be the case again. And I was just wondering if you had some guys, whether they're first-year players, second-year players, transfer portal guys. There's a couple obvious candidates, but there's also, I think, in my mind, a couple of not-so-obvious candidates. I think that are really, if Penn State's going to get to where a lot of people think they can get in the fall, these guys are going to have to really play pretty big roles.
Yeah, and I think fortunately, there's a bunch of freshmen that played immediate roles last year that you can lean on.
Yep.
Your Abdul Carters, your Katron Allens, your Nick Singletons. And then in the obvious category, I think Dani Dennis Sutton is somebody who can have a special. I think with that 3-man group they've got at defensive end, I can't remember, certainly under James Franklin, a group that had so much ability to get after the quarterback as Adisa Isaac, Dani Dennis Sutton, and Chop Robinson. And I think they're all pretty complete players too. They're not just, pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. Those are 3 really good defensive ends. And so Dennis Sutton, and then, KJ Winston at safety is another one who has behind the scenes a bit last year, who could make a run at a starting job. The freshman linebackers, Tony Rojas and Tamir Robinson, are definitely some guys to watch there. And, I think at the tight end spot, it'll be interesting to see who's the third, if that's Khalil Dinkins or Andrew Rapelier, the freshman coming in. There are definitely some intriguing things. And along the obvious lines, I want to watch and see, like James Franklin said, he was excited about his defensive tackles a couple weeks ago. Yeah. I want to see it. Like, obviously they've got some guys who can do some things and they've got some guys with experience, but can they avoid getting bullied by these Big Ten teams that want to bully them?
Yeah. You made like a lot of good points in a row there. I just want to comment on a couple of them. As far as the defensive end room goes, and Dani especially, and Chop and Adisa, the group during James's time here, which it is his 10th season, in it was 2019. I think they had now I'm blanking. They had Etor Gross Matos. They had Jason Odafe Owe was in the Shaka Tony was in the fold. They had some guys that I don't know that they're quite as polished as what I'm seeing right now, but that was a pretty good group. And they're, Sharif Miller, I think might have just moved on, but they had in that 18-19 window, they had some pretty good defensive ends. But what I think is different this year, is the fact that Dani Dennis Sutton might be the newcomer of the year in the Big Ten this year, offense or defense. I consider him a newcomer. I know he played a lot of football, but he was not on the field a lot, I think, for meaningful snaps. And he's a terror right now. He's gotten bigger and stronger. No one could handle him throughout spring. And I'm talking about, when he was working against, they have 3 pretty good offensive tackles at Penn State, and and you saw it in the blue-white game. It was one guy was not blocking this guy. I think he is really going to be a difference maker. But what I wanted to add was, it's also who's coordinating the defense. Manny Diaz. I'm sorry, I know Brent Pry, highly regarded, but this guy's different. I think he excels at getting the maximum value out of his players, whether it's with exotic schemes. He'll put people in position to make plays. And I think he thinks outside the box more than Brent did. And I think that's really going to help Penn State's defense. And the other thing I would say is, Abdul Carter, he looks great, but he's 250 pounds. And there is a lot of pass rush right there. And if I was Manny Diaz in the spring, I wouldn't talk about it either. But I have to think they gave him some pass rush work, and maybe even as a stand-up defensive end. So can you imagine if that guy takes a step forward as a blitzer and does some stuff off the edge, and all 4 of those guys stay healthy? I mean, there's some really terrific defenses nationally, but that pressure off the edge just from those 4 players is crazy to think about.
And I think that's the thing, it's a premium thing in football to have a pass rusher or 2. And as you mentioned with Abdul Carter, there's 4 guys who can get after it. Yeah. And, it's such a big foundational thing, especially as I think your cornerbacks are fine. Like obviously with Kalen King coming in there, but yeah. I don't know about the 4, 5, 6 cornerbacks yet, but that can help them a great deal whenever they do have, let's say, some reserves on the field or whatever. And the fact that the linebackers can make so many roaming plays like Carter can, I mean, this can be a really good group. And I think with Manny Diaz, again, Brent Pry did a great job, but I think Penn State fans were refreshed to see the aggression. And I think to your point, doing a little bit better job fitting the scheme to the talent as opposed to the talent to the scheme. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing, you mentioned the defensive tackles, and you're right. And until they actually show they can do it in a big game, Illinois is on the schedule this year, and you can dismiss them all you want. But 2 years ago, the guy that has the rushing record at Beaver Stadium, I think Chase Brown, the guy from Illinois, when they ran all. I know PJ Mustipher had just gotten hurt, but Illinois whomped them pretty good, and they weren't even trying to hide what they were going to try and do to Penn State. They just said, we're going to line up with 7 offensive linemen, and we're going to have a quarterback, and we're going to have 2 running backs, and we're going to, and we're just going to run it. You guys want to stop it, you can. They couldn't stop it. That was like one of the biggest upsets ever. But the thing that I think could be different this year is, while those threats are valid, whether it's Illinois or Michigan or even Ohio State a little bit, I think Penn State's balanced. And if Penn State can play with a lead against a team like Michigan, you saw what happened in Michigan when they fell behind TCU in the playoff.
Yeah.
They are great. If they get a lead on you, Ohio State found it out 2 years in a row. Penn State found it out last year. They're going to gore you to death, and they're going to wear you out, and they don't have to do anything fancy but lean on you. But if you force them to throw the ball and make the quarterback the guy that's got to beat you, I think you're in a much better shape than you are if you let those 2 running backs just wail away on you with that offensive line. That is one way they can actually get the defensive line better, is to get a lead and force the other teams maybe to not be able to run the ball.
And that's like, there's a couple teams there, like it's very few teams are willing or have the patience to drive 90 yards on 33 plays, but Illinois is absolutely in that category.
Harbaugh would love that. That's Harbaugh's dream.
Yes. And so, if a team is willing to just take 3-4-3 and go down the field that way, there's just not many teams and coordinators who want to do that. Right. But those 2 teams specifically are the ones that I'm kind of concerned about as far as that goes. But we'll see what the tackles do. Real quick, I just want to give you rapid fire. We're kind of nearing an end here. Any other storylines or players that we didn't mention? Omari Evans was another one I wanted to throw out.
Omari Evans, by far, I think, is a guy that can really be a difference maker if he continues the progress he made late in spring camp. He's a guy. I wanted to say one other thing. I know you were a little bit. You mentioned the corners, right? Because Joey Porter Jr. is in the NFL. They have Kalen King back, and he is now projected to be a first-round pick. But we're going to pump the brakes on that because we were sure Joey was going in the first round last year, right? So I'm not going to say very, very, very early pick in the draft. I think Johnny Dixon's the player they really like. But what I would say, Dustin, is another telltale sign. I mentioned at the top of the podcast, when James Franklin and his staff identify and offer a kid who's a 3-star at camp right away, it's a telltale sign this guy's better than people realize. There's a reason why Storm Duck got the hell out of Dodge at the end of spring, right? He was an all ACC corner, and James talked him up at the start of camp. I think James met with everyone at the end of camp and said, I'm very honest with them where they stand, and he's a veteran player. I think James laid it out and said, look, we like our corner room regardless if you're going to be part of it or not. I mean, I don't think it's just Cam. I don't think it's just Cam Miller. I think Elliott Washington, who enrolled early, who was a high 4-star that could play safety or corner, he worked at corner. He worked at corner throughout spring. But I think that corner room, it's already good, but I think internally they probably feel a lot better about the corner room than I think some people realize. And that's without Joey Porter, because I think that's one of the reasons why Storm's like, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if Lamont Payne is part of that discussion, but you know, I kind of recently rewatched his film, and he looks like he's got some pretty good change of direction, feet, hips. I mean, maybe they are very excited about those young guys, and maybe those young guys, they're not afraid to put them out there either. So if that freshman group has 1 or 2 or even 3 guys that they really like, that kind of changes the depth chart, it changes the game.
Yeah, it's all systems go. Like I said, this is only one of a number of podcasts that we'll be talking about who are we really looking at? Because I think Penn State knows, the coaching staff knows, 80 to 85% of what their killer roster is going to look like, and I do feel like this is his best team. I do. Yeah. I know they won the Big Ten title in 2016. I know they were right there in 2017, and that was a really good team. But I think if you look at the depth and you look at every position group, those teams had some holes, and they were able to, whether it was Trace or Saquon Barkley or Mike Gesicki or Chris Godwin, they could cover it up with some splash plays. This team can beat you a lot of different ways, and it's not just with offense. It's not just with defense. It actually, if they can get their kicking game together, which it sounds like stupid to say that, but there is not a lot of areas where if they stay healthy, I think they are going to have problems with. And I do think this is a year in the Big Ten with a changing quarterback at Ohio State and with Michigan coming into Beaver Stadium. It doesn't get. I don't think it gets much more gettable for Penn State's talent this year, the way the schedule lines up. And I think August is really going to, if they can put the finishing touches on that final 10% maybe of the players that are going to help them, and they can start fast, it's really going to be, I think, a fun year.
Final word for me on that front is, if you think about, okay, you're building a roster, you want premium pass rushers, you would like a premium left tackle, a lockdown cornerback, and a 5-star quarterback. Right. Yeah. And that's not even getting into, some of the depth and stuff like that with the running backs and everything. I mean, they've got some really foundational pieces, some exciting foundational pieces, more so than I think they've had under James Franklin. So I think there's reason to be excited. You always focus on and nitpick a bit, and you wonder about the question marks and defensive tackles we talked about. Yep. But in the end there is a lot of premium talent on this roster, and they're in the right places.
Agree 100%, Dusty. I have a funny feeling this isn't the last Blue White Breakdown podcast we're going to do this summer. I'm looking forward to it. We like I said, every week comes something else is coming that's good news for Penn State. So stick with us, whether it's Dustin and Johnny and I, Dave Jones and somebody. We're going to be coming at you from all angles, but we're going to talk a lot, I think, about what's to come in August.
We just hit the surface here. There's still a lot more to go between now and August. That's Bob Flounders. I'm Dustin Hockensmith for the Blue White Breakdown. Be sure to check it out on PennLive.com as well as everywhere you can get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.